Welcome to Dark Investigations. I'm Bill Dunlap, and tonight we're diving into a story that starts with a bang. Literally. It's the early hours of June 18th, 2013. The clock ticks just past 4 in the morning. Los Angeles is still asleep, or at least pretending to be. North Highland Avenue, south of Melrose, a stretch of road like any other in this city, lined with palms, lit by sodium lamps casting long shadows. That's when it happens. A Mercedes barrels down the avenue. No other cars in sight. Just this one vehicle moving fast. Too fast. Suddenly, it veers. Tire tracks later show it leaving the roadway, cutting across to the median. Straight for a tree. The impact is catastrophic. Metal crumples, glass shatters. The car slams into that palm with enough force to make the ground shake. It's a single-vehicle crash on North Highland Avenue in Los Angeles. The Mercedes collides with a tree, and everything changes in an instant. Flames erupt almost immediately. The car catches fire post-impact, lighting up the pre-dawn darkness. Smoke billows into the cool night air. Displaced engine components end up near the next intersection. That's how violent it was. The force ripping parts of the car free, sending them flying. Emergency services arrive quickly. The crash is clocked at approximately 4:20 a.m. By 4:35, it's over. Death is pronounced on the scene. The driver? Michael Hastings, a journalist known for rattling cages. But right now, in this moment, he's just a man in a wrecked car. The Los Angeles County Department of Medical Examiner Coroner handles the aftermath. Their report is stark, clinical. They note the tire marks in their narrative, tracing the path off the road. Physical evidence paints a clear picture of what went down. As for the fire, toxicology shows he didn't breathe in much of the fumes. Death came quick, before the blaze could claim him. The official cause? Major injuries from the violent, rapid collision at the front of the vehicle? Nothing subtle about it. You can still picture the scene hours later. Charred wreckage, the acrid scent of burnt metal and rubber, lingering like a bad memory. Cops cordon off the area, photographers snap away. The city wakes up to another tragedy on its streets. But here's the thing that nags at you. A crash this clean-cut, yet something feels off. You know how these things go. Clean on paper, messy in the dark. The palms sway gently in the breeze, indifferent. Highland Avenue goes back to normal, as if nothing happened. But for Michael Hastings, this is the end of the line. Or is it just the beginning of a deeper story? Coming up, we step back to see the world Hastings lived in, the scoops he chased, the giants he toppled, and the shadows that followed him before that fateful dawn. We've laid out that final fiery moment. Now, let's step back and get a sense of the man behind it all. Michael Hastings, the journalist who chased stories like shadows in the night. He came into this world on January 28th, 1980, up in Malone, New York. Small town, right on the edge of the Adirondacks. Cold winters, quiet streets. The kind of place that shapes you without you even knowing it. Malone's not exactly a hotbed for future war reporters, but Hastings had that spark early on. Grew up with a curiosity that wouldn't quit. always digging into what lay beneath the surface. By the time he hit his 20s, he was off to New York University, class of 2002, earning a BA in journalism. NYU, buzzing with ambition, the city that never sleeps feeding right into his drive. He didn't waste time. Straight out of school, Hastings threw himself into the thick of it as a war correspondent for Newsweek and other outlets. Iraq, Afghanistan, the early 2000s wars that dragged on like a bad dream. Picture him there, dust in his eyes, notebook in hand, embedding with troops while the world watched from afar. He wasn't just reporting, he was living it, breathing the chaos. But war takes its toll, doesn't it? In January 2007, his fiancée Andrea Perhamovich got caught in the crossfire in Baghdad. Killed just like that, in a place that was supposed to be about building something better. Hastings poured his grief into words, wrote a memoir in 2008 called I Lost My Love in Baghdad. Raw, honest, the kind of book that hits you where it hurts. That loss hardened him, fueled his fire. He kept pushing, earning a reputation as the guy who wouldn't back down, no matter how hot the story got. Then came 2010, and his big break, or break-in, depending on how you look at it. That Rolling Stone profile, the runaway general on Jen, Stanley McChrystal. Hastings shadowed McChrystal and his team, captured the off-the-cuff remarks, the disdain for higher-ups. It was explosive. McChrystal resigned days after it dropped. For that piece, he snagged the George Polk Award for magazine reporting. Recognition like that? It cements you as a force, but it also paints a target on your back. He followed up with The Operators in 2012, expanding on that Afghanistan reporting. A book that peeled back the layers on military brass, showing the mess behind the medals. Same year, he put out Panic 2012, diving into the political frenzy. Hastings had this way of cutting through the noise, calling it like he saw it. By the early 2010s, he was at BuzzFeed as a national security reporter. Digital age journalism. Fast, furious, and fearless. He thrived there, chasing leads on power and its abuses. This was the era of endless wars, embedded reporters, and stories that could topple generals. Hastings embodied it, young, relentless, with a cynicism earned in the field. You know how these things go. Heroes in the headlines, ghosts in the green rooms. But Hastings? He never played that game. His work stood out because he got close, too close sometimes, asked the questions others whispered about in the dark. From alone to the front lines, he built a career on truth, no matter the cost. That fearless streak defined him, made him a name in a cutthroat world. War reporting in those days, it was gritty, dangerous, a far cry from desk jobs. Hastings lived it, and it shaped every word he wrote. He wasn't afraid to ruffle feathers, to expose the underbelly of power. That's what set him apart in an industry full of echoes. Looking back, his path seems inevitable. Small-town kid to war zones, memoirs to exposés. But it was his grit that carried him through. Next, we will move forward to trace the days and final hours leading up to the crash, examining Hastings' activities, communications, and state of mind immediately before the incident.
We've been through the trenches of Hastings' career, that gritty world of exposes and enemies. Now, let's narrow it down to those last tense hours before everything shifted. It's June 17th, 2013, and Michael Hastings is keyed up, typing out an email to his colleagues at BuzzFeed. The subject line? It's cryptic, but the words inside hit hard. He mentions surveillance, drops in a reference to an FBI investigation that's got him on edge. Hastings tells them he's onto a big story, something major, the kind that could rattle cages. And then this. He plans to go off the radar for a bit. Just like that, he's signaling a need to vanish, to duck out of sight. You can almost hear the urgency in those keystrokes, the quiet paranoia creeping in. What was he so worried about? Who did he think was watching? Hastings wasn't the type to spook easily. He'd stared down war zones, grilled, generals. But that night, something had him rattled enough to hit send on a message like that. Picture him in his apartment, maybe nursing a drink, the glow of the screen casting shadows on the walls. He's typing fast, laying it out. The feds, the story, the need to disappear. His colleagues get the email late that evening. It's after business hours, but it's not casual. This is Hastings saying, "Hey, things are getting hot here." You know how these things go. A whisper of trouble, and suddenly the shadows feel a little longer. Reports from friends paint a picture of his mindset that night. Anxious, maybe a touch erratic. He'd been talking about feeling followed, about lines being crossed. That email wasn't just a heads up, it was a flare in the dark. Going off the radar, what did he mean by that? A quick trip out of town? Laying low? Whatever it was, it suggested he needed space to think, to dig deeper, without eyes on him. The big story he mentioned, we can only speculate, but given his track record, it was bound to be explosive. And the FBI angle? That adds a layer of intrigue, doesn't it? Was it real? Or just the fog of a late-night worry? Either way, those final messages set the stage for what came next. Following this build-up, we'll dissect the crash itself in painstaking detail, analyzing the physical sequence of impact and resulting injuries. We've been over those last messages and that email stirring up all the talk. Now, let's shift to the road that night, piecing together the crash from what the scene left behind. It's like rewinding a bad dream, but slower, frame by frame, based solely on the marks and wreckage. Picture the stretch of Highland Avenue, quiet, pre-dawn hours, streetlights casting long shadows. The car was moving fast, no doubt about that. Then, those tire marks tell the start of it. They swerve right off the roadway, cutting a path straight into the median. Deep grooves in the dirt, like the wheels fought for grip, but lost. You can almost hear the squeal, the rubber burning against asphalt before it digs into softer ground. The vehicle doesn't stop there. It barrels through, heading for whatever stood in the way. Then comes the hit, brutal, unforgiving. The front of the car caves in deep, metal folding like cheap tin. Extensive crush at the nose, hood crumpled, bumper shattered into pieces. That impact sends everything flying. Debris everywhere. A wide spread of parts, glass, twisted bits scattered across the site. The force was enough to rip the heart out of the machine. The main power unit ends up clear over by the next intersection, separated from the rest of the wreck. Lying there amid the chaos, like it was flung aside in some violent breakup. And then the fire starts. Not right away, but it builds quick, flames licking up from the mangled front, spreading through what's left. The heat warps metal, chars the interior, black smoke billowing into the night sky. The medical examiner steps in later, piecing together the human side. Burns on the body, sure, but they happened after the fact, post-mortem, as they call it. No real sign of breathing in the fumes. The levels of that deadly gas in the blood stayed way low, barely registering. Meaning the fire raged on while life had already slipped away. As for what ended it, the coroner pinned it on overwhelming injuries from smashing headlong at top speed. The kind of force that crushes everything in an instant. No coming back from that. You know how these things go. Clean on paper, messy in the dark. The wreckage paints a stark story. One of velocity meeting an abrupt end. Tire tracks, crushed steel, scattered remains, and a fire that finished the job too late. It's all there in the forensics, cold and unyielding. Coming up, we'll dive into what followed, the rush of responders, those initial reports, and how the world reacted in the hours right after. Now that we've laid out the crash in all its stark detail, pulling from the hard evidence without guessing at shadows, it's time to step into the chaos that followed. Those first hours after the wreck, that's where the story starts to fray at the edges. Emergency crews rolled up fast, sirens cutting through the pre-dawn quiet of that Hollywood street. Firefighters doused the blaze. Paramedics pushed through the smoke, but it was already too late. Hastings was pronounced dead at the scene at 4:35, right there amid the twisted metal and lingering heat. Word spread quick. Local news crews arrived, snapping photos, feeding the story into the wires. By morning, it was everywhere. A journalist's car crash, fatal. No survivors. But here's where it gets interesting. Or maybe just predictable. You know how these things go. A high-profile death, and the whispers start before the ashes cool. Rumors erupted almost immediately, like sparks from that fire. People were sharing dramatic post-crash imagery online. The wreckage still smoldering under the streetlights. Then came the later publicized CCTV video, grainy footage catching the speeding vehicle barreling down the road, ending in flames. Those visuals hit hard. They looked too perfect, too cinematic for some folks. And this was 2013, remember? The air was thick with suspicion. The social climate was saturated by surveillance revelations, government eyes everywhere, leak investigations popping up like weeds. Edward Snowden had just blown the lid off NSA programs, and suddenly everyone was questioning what was real. Hastings, with his history of digging into powerful people, fit right into that narrative. Forums lit up, social media buzzed. Was it an accident? Or something staged? Conspiracy theories bloomed in this dense ecosystem, from hacked car systems to silenced whistleblowers. It was the first ripple, raw and unfiltered, before anyone official stepped in to sort the mess. Folks weren't waiting for reports. They were connecting dots in the dark, fueled by those fiery images and a world already on edge. And yeah, some of it stuck, because why not? In a time when trust was currency, and there wasn't much left. These early hours set the tone, turning a crash into a question mark. But as the sun came up, the pros took over. That's where we'll go next, diving into the formal investigations that kicked off right away. So, we'd just scratched the surface on the frenzy that kicked off right after the crash. Emergency crews racing in, theories exploding online amid all that 2013 tension. But now, let's shift to what came next. The first real moves by the pros. The Los Angeles police and the medical examiners stepping in to make sense of it all. It started at the scene. That stretch of Highland Avenue still smoldering under the early morning light. Detectives from the LAPD's West Traffic Division rolled up, cordoning off the area, marking evidence, piecing together the basics. They walked the site, noting the skid marks, the twisted metal, the way the car had come to rest against that palm tree. No rushed judgments, just the slow, methodical work of cataloging what was there. By midday, the medical examiner's team arrived, handling the remains with that quiet efficiency you see in these cases. The Los Angeles County Medical Examiner coroner took over, conducting the autopsy that would lay out the hard facts. They documented everything, the injuries, the state of the body, all under those harsh lab lights. Then came the toxicology report. Key piece, right? It returned ethanol negative. No alcohol in the system. But there were small quantities of amphetamine and cannabinoids detected. Levels so low, the examiners noted they were unlikely intoxicating. Nothing that would impair judgment or reaction time in any serious way. Just traces, the kind that might linger from casual use days before. 2 days after the crash, the LAPD put out their first public word. Detectives had combed the scene, reviewed what they had, and stated flat out, no sign of foul play. It looked like a tragic accident, nothing more. Reuters picked it up, along with other outlets, reporting the LAPD's stance loud and clear. No red flags, no hidden hands at work. And then there's the FBI angle. Early on, they issued a denial of any active investigation into Hastings. No probes, no files open on the crash, or the man himself. Later, under FOIA, the FBI vault released a multi-page file. It showed no investigative interest, no leads pursued, no deeper dives in those records. Clean slate, officially. You know how these things go. Official lines drawn quick, but the shadows always whisper otherwise. Coming up, we'll dig into how the big players, media, cops, feds, handled the whispers turning into roars, crafting the story everyone was supposed to swallow. After digging into those initial probes by the authorities, it's time to see how they spun the story outward. You know, the part where the suits step in and start managing what the rest of us hear. This is where the LAPD and the FBI really leaned into shaping the narrative, especially as whispers of conspiracy started bubbling up online and in the corners of the press. The LAPD came out swinging early on, publicly pushing back against those wild theories. They kept reiterating that there were no signs of foul play, sticking to their guns on that one. It was their way of saying, hey, nothing to see here. Move along. And in a city like LA, where scandals brew faster than coffee, that kind of firm stance can either calm the waters or just stir up more suspicion. Then there's the FBI, stepping into the fray a bit later with their FOIA release. They described it as nothing more than administrative stuff, retention of media articles, really. It was their subtle way of distancing the Bureau from any real investigative interest, like saying we're just filing paperwork, not chasing shadows. You know how these things go, official denials that leave just enough room for doubt. The media, of course, played right into this. Outlets across the board picked up those FBI and LAPD statements, reporting them straight-faced and influencing how the whole narrative unfolded. Some amplified the official line, tempering those alternative theories that were gaining traction. Others gave a nod to the chatter, but always bookended with the institutional word. It created this weird echo chamber where the story bounced between skepticism and shutdown. And let's not forget the backdrop of 2013. The social climate was saturated by surveillance revelations. Snowden had just blown the lid off things, and everyone was on edge about government overreach. That intense paranoia shaped how the media and institutions reacted, making every official statement feel like it was under a microscope. The LAPD's pushback wasn't just defensive, it was a bunker mentality in a time when trust in authorities was crumbling. Same with the FBI's Vault release. It acted as this significant institutional statement, a way to say we're transparent, but only on our terms. All of it fed into public perception, reinforcing the accident narrative, while conspiracy talk simmered just below the surface. It's fascinating, really, how these responses didn't just manage the message. They molded what people believed, or at least what they were willing to question out loud. But with the framing set, it's time to zero in on the people at the heart of it all, starting with Michael Hastings and what drove him through this tangled web. We've seen how the institutions closed ranks after the crash, crafting that tidy story while doubts simmered in the background. But to really understand why any of this matters, we need to talk about Michael Hastings himself, the guy who stared down giants and didn't blink. Michael was the kind of reporter who didn't just chase stories, he hunted them, like a detective in some forgotten noir flick. Peers and editors saw him as fearless and consequential, someone whose words could topple careers and shift narratives. He had this way of getting inside, cultivating sources deep in the military and intelligence communities. These weren't casual chats over coffee. They were hard-won connections, built on trust and persistence in places most journalists wouldn't dare tread. And yeah,
That approach courted controversy, made him powerful enemies along the way. You poke at the wrong secrets, and suddenly you're not just a writer, you're a target. His books laid it all out, raw and unfiltered. Take I Lost My Love in Baghdad. That's his memoir from the front lines. A gut punch about war, loss, and the personal toll of digging for truth. It shows you his worldview. No illusions, just the gritty reality of power and its costs. Then there's The Operators, his deep dive into the Afghanistan war machine. That one pulled back the curtain on the brass, exposing the egos and the chaos. His style was all about that, stripping away the polish, revealing the mess underneath. And it worked. His coverage led straight to General Stanley McChrystal's resignation. One article, one set of unguarded quotes, and a 4-star general's career implodes. That's the kind of impact Michael had. Fearless? Absolutely. Consequential? You bet. But here's the thing. You know how these things go. Clean on paper, messy in the dark. His motivation seemed straightforward. Get the story, tell it straight, no matter who it burned. He wasn't in it for the glory. It was about holding power accountable, shining light on the shadows. Colleagues remembered him as intense, driven, with a cynicism born from seeing too much. Yet there was this quiet passion, a belief that journalism could actually change things. His legacy? It's in those stories that rattle cages, the ones that made enemies list him high. When you frame his death against that backdrop, it colors everything. His fearlessness, his sources, the controversies he stirred. Next, we'll pick apart the contradictions and anomalies that poke holes in the official accident story, the pieces that just don't add up. We've sketched out the guy at the center of this storm, the reporter who stared down giants without blinking. But suspicions don't thrive on personality alone. They need cracks in the story to take root. So let's turn to the evidence, or rather, the pieces that feel like they're missing or just don't fit. You'd think, with a crash this high profile, we'd have every detail laid bare, right? Yet here we are, years later, and the public record still lacks a disclosed full collision reconstruction report. No quantified speed estimates, no deep dive into the mechanics of what went wrong. And that electronic data recorder, the car's black box, basically. Its readout hasn't seen the light of day in any official release. It's like they're holding back the one thing that could pin down exactly how fast he was going. Or if something malfunctioned. That absence alone keeps the questions coming. Then there's the scene itself, the way it looked to anyone who saw the footage. Dramatic visual aspects that stick in your mind. The way parts of the vehicle ended up so far from the wreck. That massive fireball lighting up the night. It wasn't your average fender bender aftermath. The post-impact fire roared hot and fast, and the component ejection scattered metal like it had been launched. Sure, experts say this can happen in high-energy collisions, but the sheer spectacle of it, the engine displacement so extreme, the flames looking almost too explosive,
It's the kind of thing that invites all sorts of lay speculation.
People see that and think, wait, was this really just an accident? You know how these things go. Clean on paper, messy in the dark. Of course, to be fair, there's no documented forensic evidence of homicide or explosive residue in the public record. Nothing that screams sabotage, at least not on the surface. The fire and the ejections are consistent with a bad crash at speed, but they're exceptional enough in appearance to fuel doubt. Why does the engine end up blocks away? How does the blaze erupt so violently? These aren't wild theories. They're reactions to what's right there in the photos and videos. And without that full report, or the EDR data, the official account leaves room for those shadows to linger. It's not about proving foul play. It's about why these contradictions haven't been cleared up. Next, we'll dig into the official accident narrative itself, laying out its evidence and where the pushback comes from. We've poked at those odd gaps in the forensics, the stuff that leaves folks wondering if the whole story adds up. But now, let's step back and hear the official line. Straight from the reports, no frills, just what they put on paper. It starts with the coroner's autopsy, the kind of code document that spells out the end in clinical terms. They pinned the cause of death on massive blunt force trauma, consistent with a high-speed front-end impact. Picture a car slamming hard, full force, into something unyielding. That's the gist, without the gory details. Then there's the toxicology report, which came back clean in key ways. Toxicology ethanol negative, meaning no booze in his system to cloud judgment or slow reflexes. There were traces of other substances, but nothing at levels that suggest impairment. Low-level drugs unlikely intoxicating, as the experts put it. Shifting to the scene itself, the physical evidence tells a story of chaos on the road. Investigators noted tire marks from roadway to median, skidding off course before the crash. Debris spread wide, consistent with a vehicle losing control at high speed. Bits of metal and glass everywhere. No neat patterns, just the random scatter of a bad wreck, followed by fire that consumed what was left. LAPD weighed in early, their public statements cutting through the noise. They saw LAPD no sign of foul play. No evidence anyone tampered with the car or set this up. Just a tragic accident, they said. The kind that happens when speed meets a wrong turn in the dead of night. You know how these things go. Clean on paper, messy in the dark. Even the feds stayed out of it, according to what we've dug up. FBI vault no investigative interest. Their FOIA records show nothing. No files opened, no agents poking around Hastings. It all converges. Coroner, cops, feds, painting a picture of a solo crash, blunt and final. High speed, loss of control, impact, fire. That's the narrative they've stuck with. No deviations. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? But for now, that's the story as told. Of course, not everyone buys it wholesale, which brings us to the shadows lurking beyond the official reports. Next, we'll dive into those alternative theories, the ones whispering about sabotage,
hacks from afar, or something covered up tight.
We've laid out the official story, the one that ties everything up neat, with speed and bad luck.
But not everyone's buying it. Not when the shadows start whispering about something more deliberate. Let's talk theories, the kind that keep you up at night, wondering if accidents are ever just that. First up, remote vehicle hacking. The idea that someone could slip into a car's systems from afar, force acceleration, disable controls, turn a drive into a death trap.
It's not science fiction anymore.
Researchers have shown how modern vehicles, wired up with computers and connections, can be vulnerable to this kind of manipulation. Hack the brakes, rev the engine remotely. Boom. You're not in control.
And public figures have leaned into this.
Richard A. Clarke, the cybersecurity expert who advised presidents, looked at the details and said the crash was consistent with a vehicle cyber attack. That's not proof, but it's a heavyweight nodding toward possibility. Then there's WikiLeaks, dropping statements alleging they'd been in contact with Hastings before his death.
They hinted at bigger secrets, maybe enough to make someone nervous.
You know how these things go. Whispers turn into theories, and suddenly everyone's connecting dots in the dark. Shifting gears, there's the sabotage angle, like an explosive or incendiary device planted to make it all go up in flames. Witnesses talked about the impact sounding explosive, and that dramatic fireball, the engine ejection. It's the stuff that screams foul play to some. Couple that with theories of targeted retaliation, payback for stories that hit too close to power. Hastings had enemies, or at least people who'd rather he shut up. These ideas thrive on technical plausibility. Yeah, cars can be hacked, devices can be hidden. But here's the rub. They're built on generalizations, not hard evidence from this case. No disclosed vehicle forensics or malware artifacts to back it up. What fuels them? Those crash visuals, raw and shocking. And that email mentioning an FBI investigation? Elements that stir the pot of dark hypotheses. It's easy to see why they persist. In a world of secrets, who wants to believe in random tragedy? Still, without specifics, they're just shadows. Compelling, but slippery. Coming up, we'll see how Hastings' death echoed through the lives he touched, reshaping paths in journalism and beyond. We've waded through those shadowy theories, the ones that twist around technical what-ifs and public whispers, all without that hard forensic punch to back them up. Now, let's step back and see what rippled out from Michael Hastings' death. It hit hard in the newsrooms, especially among those who chased the same dangerous stories he did. His peers, the ones grinding away at national security beats, saw him as this fearless force. Someone who didn't just report the news, he reshaped it, made generals resign, exposed the ugly underbelly of power. Losing him felt like a gut punch to the whole field of investigative journalism. You could hear it in the tributes, the quiet conversations at press bars. He was consequential, the kind of reporter who left marks that didn't fade. And in a nod to that legacy, BuzzFeed stepped up later on. They created a National Security Reporting Fellowship right in his name. It's meant to keep that spirit alive, funding young journalists to dig into the same murky waters Hastings navigated. A way to honor the guy who wouldn't back down, even when the heat got intense. But then there were those conspiracy narratives, the ones that bubbled up right after. They didn't just fade into the background. They seeped into public discourse, coloring how people talked about his death. Suddenly, every skeptic had a theory, and it influenced everything from online forums to serious discussions. It muddied the waters on trust, made folks question official lines even more than they already did. You know how these things go. Heroes get sainted, but the rumors turn them into ghosts, haunting the narrative. That cynicism spread to the industry too. Journalists started looking over their shoulders a bit more when reporting on deaths like this. It shaped how stories got told, adding layers of caution, or sometimes fueling deeper dives into potential foul play. Hastings' passing became a benchmark, a reminder of the risks and the ripples. His legacy? It's got this dual edge now. On one side, inspiration for bold reporting. On the other, a tangled web of doubt that complicates how we remember him. And that impact lingers in investigative journalism, pushing reporters to be tougher, more vigilant. But as we wrap this up, there are still those unresolved questions hanging in the air, where the facts stop and the mystery just lingers. We've talked about the ripples Hastings' death sent through the world of journalism, how it fueled those endless theories and that deep-seated distrust of the powers that be. But here's where it gets sticky. Even years later, there are these nagging questions that just won't fade into the background. It's like staring at a puzzle with half the pieces missing and the box top torn to shreds. The official story wrapped up neat and tidy, case closed. But for a lot of folks, the doubts keep whispering in the dark. Take the collision itself. There's no disclosed full collision reconstruction report with quantified speed or EDR readout. You'd think something like that would be standard, right? Lay out the facts, the numbers, let everyone see how it all added up. But nope, it's locked away. Or maybe it doesn't even exist in a form we can scrutinize. That absence leaves a void, one that conspiracy hunters love to fill with their own wild guesses. Then there's the tech side. No documented forensic evidence of malware or telematics compromise. In a world where cars are basically rolling computers, you'd expect a deep dive into whether someone tampered with the system. Hack the brakes, mess with the accelerator. It's the stuff of spy novels. But without proof, one way or the other, the questions fester. Officials say nothing there, but they haven't shown the work, so how do you trust that? And let's not forget the June 17th, 2013 email referencing an FBI investigation. Hastings drops this line about being under scrutiny, maybe even in trouble, and then, bam, he's gone days later. What was that all about? Was it paranoia, or did he really stumble onto something hot?
The debates rage on forums and in quiet conversations with no clear answers to shut them down. The dramatic engine displacement and fireball are visually compelling but not fully accounted for in public records. Eyewitnesses described a scene straight out of an action flick, flames roaring, parts scattered. Yet the explanations feel half-baked, leaving room for doubt about what really caused such a spectacle. You know how these things go. Officials declare it done, but the shadows keep dancing with possibilities. The engine block found displaced near the next intersection only adds to the oddity, like the car tore itself apart in ways that defy easy logic. Why hasn't anyone pinned down the how and why with hard evidence? It's that gap between what's said and what's shown that breeds uncertainty. So while the case file gathers dust, marked accident, the public mind wanders, chasing ghosts in the official narrative. These lingering mysteries remind us that closure isn't always what it seems, especially when the facts feel incomplete. In the end, we'll have to weigh it all and ask, was this just a tragic mishap or something more sinister lurking in the shadows? We've poked at those lingering shadows, the kind that make you question everything official. Now, it's time to step back and weigh what we've got, the hard facts against the whispers of something more sinister. Let's cut to the chase here. The central puzzle boils down to this. Was Michael Hastings' death just a tragic high-speed single-vehicle crash with a post-impact fire, or does the evidence point to foul play tied to his reporting? I've sifted through it all, night after night, nursing a drink in the quiet hours. On one side, you've got the official story, stamped and sealed by the coroner, LAPD, and even the FBI. They all line up, consistent as a row of dominoes. No twists, no hidden agendas in the paperwork, just a straightforward account of the car going too fast, hitting hard, and bursting into flames afterward. And here's the kicker. In all those public records, there's no documented forensic evidence screaming homicide or sabotage. No traces of tampering, no signs of remote control hacks, nothing that forensics picked up to suggest someone orchestrated this. It's clean, almost too clean, if you're the type to see patterns in the fog. You know how these things go, airtight on the surface, but you can't shake the feeling there's a draft somewhere. Then, there are the alternative theories, the ones that keep people talking years later. They sound persuasive at first glance, drawing on general ideas about what could happen. Hacked vehicles, covert ops, the works. Folks point to photos, videos, piecing together interpretations that hint at conspiracy. But when you dig deeper, these ideas lean heavy on plausibility, on what might be possible in theory. They don't hold up with actual forensic documentation from this case. No lab results, no expert breakdowns confirming sabotage here. It's all smoke, no fire, if you'll pardon the expression. And let's not forget the FBI's angle. Those publicly released files from the FBI vault make it clear. No active investigative interest in Hastings connected to his death. They weren't chasing leads, weren't building a file on foul play. It's like they closed the book before it even opened. So, where does that leave us? The authoritative records push hard for accident, backed by consistent reports across the board. Yet those alternative angles linger, plausible enough to fuel doubts, even if they lack the solid proof to overturn the official line. In the end, maybe that's the real story. Not a tidy verdict, but the haze that never quite clears.